Hello and welcome to another part of Designing Microsoft Azure Infrastructure Solutions exam practice questions. This is question number 29 of the series. You have an Azure subscription that contains the resources shown in the following table. You have three resources which are virtual machine type, and then you have three resources which are virtual network type. Now, VM1 is a front-end component in the central US Azure region. VM2 is a backend component in the East US Azure region, and VM3 is a backend component in the East US 2 Azure region. VNet1 hosts VM1, VNet2 hosts VM2, and VNet3 hosts VM3. You create peering between VNet1 and VNet2 and between VNet1 and VNet3. The virtual machines hosts an HTTPS-based client-server application and are accessible only via the private IP address of each virtual machine. You need to implement a load balancing solution for VM2 and VM3. The solution must ensure that if VM2 fails, requests will be routed automatically to VM3, and if VM3 fails, requests will be routed automatically to VM2. What should you include in the solution? And folks, your options are Azure Firewall Premium, Azure Application Gateway version 2, a cross-region load balancer, Azure Front Door Premium. Friends, there are several factors that you need to take into consideration while answering this question. First one being requirement is to set up load balancing. So you can automatically rule out option A, Azure Firewall Premium, as it is for managing and filtering network traffic, not load balancing. Now, the second factor you need to take into consideration is that VMs are located in different Azure regions, which is Central US, East US, and East US 2. Based on this, you can rule out option B. Azure Application Gateway is region specific and is designed to handle traffic within a single region. Now, third and final requirement is to make use of private IPs, and for that very reason, you will rule out the use of cross-region load balancer. While both Azure Front Door Premium and cross-region load balancer support load balancing across regions, the cross-region load balancer does not support the use of private IPs. You can refer to the link on your screen to understand all the limitations of cross-region load balancers. Next question. You have an Azure subscription that contains the SQL servers on Azure shown in the following table. Now you have two SQL servers with the name of SQL SVR1 and SQL SVR2. SQL SVR1 is in resource group RG1 and is hosted in East US location, whereas SQL Server 2 is in RG2 and is hosted in West US location. The subscription contains the storage accounts shown in the following table. You have two storage accounts with the name of Storage 1 and Storage 2. Storage 1 is in RG1 resource group and is hosted in East US location and is of storage version 2, which is general purpose V2 storage kind. Storage 2 is hosted in RG2 and is located in Central US region and is of kind blob storage. You create the Azure SQL databases shown in the following table. You basically create three SQL databases with the name of SQL DB1, DB2, and DB3. SQL DB1 and DB2 are in SQL Server 1, whereas SQL DB3 is in SQL Server 2. Now, the pricing tier for SQL DB1 and SQL DB2 is standard, whereas SQL DB3 is premium. Now, for each of the following, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Your first statement is when you enable auditing for SQL DB1, you can store the audit information to storage 1. This statement is correct, folks. You will be able to store audit information for SQL DB1 in storage 1. We will shortly head to Azure portal to do a practical around this to understand the factors involved. But first, let's look at other statements of this question. Now, the next statement is when you enable auditing for SQL DB2, you can store the audit information to storage too. This is incorrect and not possible, folks. Let's look at third statement. When you enable auditing for SQL DB3, you can store the audit information to storage too. This is also an incorrect statement. You cannot store SQL DB3 audit information to storage too. Now, to understand the reason behind why a particular statement was chosen as right or wrong, I have created a Azure SQL server and then I have created multiple databases in it. And then I have created different storage accounts to replicate the kind of scenarios that we had in our question. I have tried to do a bit more than what is covered in the question so that you are prepared for certain variations of these type of questions as well. So what I have done is I have created a Azure SQL server, which is in West US region. Okay. And then I have created two databases in Azure SQL Server. Both of the databases are basically one of the database is a standard pricing tier and the other one is using premium pricing tier because that is what was done in our question. Now there was a talk about storage accounts. Let's go back to the storage accounts and have a look at them. Now, the storage accounts that I have created are into different resource groups. I've created 3 storage accounts. 2 of them are in a different resource group than the one where the Azure SQL Server is hosted. And folks, the 2 of the storage accounts are in same location as the Azure SQL Server, whereas one storage account is in a different location. Now let's go back to our Azure SQL Server and explore the databases and try to configure the audit logging. So let's click on SQL databases. Let's first try to do something in standard pricing tier database. So how do you configure audit logging? Basically, you scroll down in the left-hand menu under security, you will see auditing. And now you have to just scroll down because the auditing is not enabled at the instance level. That is the reason why it says server level auditing is disabled. But we are going to enable it at database level. So what we'll do is enable Azure SQL auditing. If you enable it, you have option to choose the destination. Now there are 3 types of destinations that are supported. It is storage, log analytics, and event hub. To mimic the scenario in our question, we are going to choose storage. Now it is giving us to choose a subscription. I'll go ahead and choose my subscription. Now here you can see I have created 3 storage accounts, but only 2 storage accounts are showing up here because they are in the same region as our Azure SQL instance. Let's go back and confirm that. So how you will confirm, we'll go back to the overview section and you can see the location of the Azure SQL Server is West US. Now I'll go back to my storage accounts and you can see 2 storage accounts are in West US. What this tells us is no matter which resource group your storage accounts are created in, whether they are in the same resource group as your Azure SQL Server or they are in different resource group, doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters here is they need to be in the same region as the Azure SQL Server. That is the first part that you have to take into consideration while answering this question. Now the next data that was there in the question was focused on the pricing tier of the databases as well. So let's go ahead and see if pricing tier makes any difference. Again, we'll go to the databases and then we will we are already into the database. I have already opened the database. And what we'll try to do is, again, try to enable it. So here, what you will see is basically in first database, which is SQL DB 1407, both these storage accounts are showing up, and this storage, this database was, I guess, let's scroll back. This was using a standard pricing tier. So both the storage accounts are still showing up. Now let's go back to the other database, which was SQL DB 1989, which is a premium tier. Let's try to enable auditing for this and see how many storage accounts are showing up. So here you can see, I'll again go through the same options and I can see both the storage accounts are showing up here. What this tells us is pricing tier doesn't really matter in this case. Resource groups also don't really matter in this case, and even the account kind also doesn't matter in this case. What matters is the location of the SQL server and the location of the storage accounts. If they are in the same location, then you can go ahead and use them for your audit logging. If they are not in the same location, you can't use them. This is question number 31 of the series. You have SQL Server on an Azure virtual machine. Databases are written nightly as part of a batch process. You need to recommend a disaster recovery solution for the data. The solution must meet the following requirements: provide the ability to recover in the event of a regional outage, support a recovery time objective, which is RTO of 15 minutes, support a recovery point objective, which is RPO of 24 hours, support automated recovery, minimize costs. What should you include in the recommendation? Your options are Azure Virtual Machine Availability Sets, Azure Disk Backup, an always on availability group, Azure Site Recovery. Friends, the right Azure service for this use case would be option D, Azure Site Recovery. Whenever there are such questions which are very data driven and it's not possible to remember everything, then apply elimination approach. So the first option, availability sets only ensure that VMs within the same region are spread across different fault domains and update domains. They do not protect against regional outages, so it can be ruled out. Then the next option, disk backup, provides data protection but does not provide automated failover or protection in case of regional outages. So you can rule this one out as well. Now the third option, always on availability groups offer high availability and disaster recovery but require SQL Server Enterprise Edition, which is more expensive. So we can rule it out as we need to minimize costs as part of one of the requirements. So folks, I hope you now understand why Azure Site Recovery has been chosen as the correct answer in this case. Next question. You have a .NET web service named Service1 that performs the following tasks: reads and writes temporary files to the local file system, writes to the application event log. You need to recommend a solution to host Service1 in Azure. The solution must meet the following requirements: minimize maintenance overhead, minimize costs. What should you include in the recommendation? Your options are an Azure App Service Web App, an Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set, an App Service Environment, which is ASE, an Azure Functions App. Folks, Azure App Service is the optimal choice as it provides a fully managed, scalable, and cost-effective platform for hosting a .NET web service with minimal maintenance overhead. While Azure Functions, virtual machine scale sets, and app service environments can also host web services, they will not provide the same balance of minimal maintenance overhead and cost effectiveness as Azure App Service web apps do in this scenario. Next question. Your company has 300 virtual machines hosted in a VMware environment. The virtual machines vary in size and have various utilization levels. You plan to move all the virtual machines to Azure. You need to recommend how many and what size Azure virtual machines will be required to move the current workloads to Azure. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you use to make the recommendation? Your options are Azure Pricing Calculator, Azure Advisor, Azure Migrate, and Azure Cost Management. Folks, Azure Migrate will be best suited for this use case. Let's head to MS documentation to understand this in more detail. So folks, let's go through discovery and assessment tool, which is part of Azure Migrate, as that will help us in answering why we have chosen Azure Migrate as the correct choice in this case. The Azure Migrate Discovery and Assessment tool discovers and assesses on-premise VMware VMs, Hyper-V VMs, and physical servers for migration to Azure. Here's what the tool does. Azure Readiness assesses whether on-premise servers, SQL Server, and web apps are ready for migration to Azure. This is one of the requirements of our question. Azure Sizing estimates the size of Azure VMs, Azure SQL configuration, number of Azure VMware solution nodes after migration. This is what the critical part is that has helped us in answering this question, because we are after how many VMs and what size Azure virtual machines will be required to move the current workloads to Azure. Azure Cost Estimation estimates costs for running on-premise servers in Azure. You get an idea around the costs as well. Then dependency analysis identifies cross-server dependencies and optimization strategies for moving interdependent servers to Azure. So folks, I hope you now understand why Azure Migrate has been chosen as the correct answer in this case. But if you still have any doubts, please post them in the comment section. Question number 34 of the series. You are deploying a sales application that will contain several Azure cloud services and handle different components of a transaction. Different cloud services will process customer orders, billing, payment, inventory, and shipping. You need to recommend a solution to enable the cloud services to asynchronously communicate transaction information by using XML messages. What should you include in the recommendation? Your options are Azure Service Fabric, Azure Data Lake, Azure Service Bus, and Azure Traffic Manager. Folks, the best recommendation for enabling asynchronous communication between the cloud services using XML messages is Azure Service Bus. Azure Service Bus is designed for asynchronous messaging between distributed applications. It allows cloud services to communicate reliably even if they are running at different times or speeds. It supports sending XML messages between services, enabling a message-based architecture where each cloud service can process different parts of a transaction and send messages to other services. Let's understand why their options are incorrect. Azure Service Fabric is a microservice orchestration platform, but it is primarily focused on hosting and managing microservices. Azure Data Lake is designed for big data storage and analytics, whereas Azure Traffic Manager is a DNS-based traffic routing service used to distribute incoming traffic across multiple endpoints. Let's look at next question. You have data files in Azure Blob Storage. You plan to transform the files and move them to Azure Data Lake Storage. You need to transform the data by using mapping data flow. Which service should you use? Your options are Azure Databricks, Azure Storage Sync, Azure Data Factory, Azure Databox Gateway. Folks, you should use Azure Data Factory in this case. Azure Data Factory is a cloud-based data integration service that allows you to create, schedule, and manage data pipelines that can move and transform data across different sources and destinations, including Azure Blob Storage and Azure Data Lake Storage. As always, let's understand the use case of other services. Azure Databricks is a cloud-based analytics platform that allows you to process large amounts of data using Apache Spark. It can also be used for data transformation and ETL, but it requires more technical expertise and development effort than using Azure Data Factory mapping data flows. Azure Storage Sync is a service that allows you to sync on-premise file servers with Azure file shares, but it does not support data transformation. And friends, Azure Data Box Gateway is a hardware device that allows you to transfer large amounts of data to Azure, but it does not support data transformation using mapping data flow. So folks, that's all for this part of the series. If you have liked the content, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe the channel. I'll see you in the next part of the series soon.